The kingdom of Astria stretched across a continent rebuilt after the old world fell. Tall crystal towers reached toward the skies, glowing faintly under the twin suns. At the heart of this kingdom stood the royal palace, a place of power, but also of silence and sorrow. Queen Eleanor sat upon her throne, her face calm, but her eyes heavy with grief. Her daughter, Princess Leela, had vanished many months ago. The people whispered that she was gone forever, lost in the dark between the stars. Every night the queen would stand by her balcony, watching the empty sky where her daughter's ship had last been seen. Her advisors told her to move on, to accept fate. But a mother's heart does not surrender so easily. She believed that somewhere her daughter still lived. Princess Leela had been sent on a mission to the outer colonies, a chain of human settlements that survived beyond the reach of the central kingdom. Her task was to bring peace among distant leaders, to show that Astria's rule was not of force, but of unity. Yet only a day after she left, her ship sent a distress call. Then silence followed. The rescue fleet searched for weeks and returned empty-handed. Hope dimmed with each passing day. Far from Astria, beyond the main star routes, a small mining outpost floated near an asteroid belt. It was a lonely place where miners worked in shifts, pulling minerals from rocks and trading them for food and water. In one corner of the outpost, a young engineer named Ethan repaired broken machines for a living. He was quiet, hardworking, and kept to himself. He had once served in the royal fleet, but left after a mission went wrong. The war had taken too much from him. One night, while checking the scanners, Ethan caught a faint signal. It was weak, barely noticeable, but something about it felt different. He followed the coordinates and took his small repair ship into the debris field. There, hidden among the rocks, floated a damaged escape pod. The metal was burned, the surface scarred, but the life sign inside was still active. Ethan brought the pod back to his workshop and began his careful work. When the pod opened, a young woman lay inside, pale and weak. Her clothes were torn, her breathing shallow. Ethan gave her water and checked her pulse. Her eyes opened slowly, filled with confusion and fear. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Ethan helped her sit up and said softly that she was safe. The name tag on her uniform caught his eye. It read, Leela. He had heard of the missing princess, but he could hardly believe she was lying before him. Still, he knew better than to ask questions. He focused on helping her recover. Over the next few days, he gave her food, warmth, and medicine. She told him bits of what had happened. Her ship had been attacked by raiders. Many of her guards were killed defending her. She escaped in the pod, drifting through space until her power ran out. Leela was too weak to move far, so Ethan protected her. When raiders came near the outpost, he hid her in the storage tunnels. When she cried in her sleep, he stayed close, guarding the door with his old blaster. He had seen too much loss in his life to let another innocent person die. As days turned into weeks, Leela began to trust him. She noticed how careful he was with every repair, how he never asked for thanks, how he smiled only when she smiled. He told her stories of his time in the fleet of stars he had seen and battles he wished had never happened. She told him about her home, about her mother who ruled with strength and kindness. One evening, while watching the stars through the dusty glass of the workshop, Leela whispered that she feared her mother, thought she was dead. Ethan looked at her and said that no mother ever stops believing. His words were simple, but they carried the warmth of truth. Leela felt tears gather in her eyes. Outside, the mining outpost continued its quiet life, unaware that a lost princess had been found. Deep in her heart, Leela knew her journey was far from over. She wanted to return home, but the road to Astria was long and dangerous. Ethan promised he would help her, no matter the cost. And for the first time in many months, hope began to shine again, faint but real, in the endless dark of space. The dust of this forgotten mining outpost settled weeks ago, but the silence still feels strange. It's been a quiet refuge, a place for me to heal, and for Ethan to teach me the art of keeping old tech alive. He watches over me, his flight jacket a constant reminder of the sky we lost. I spend my days with grease-stained hands, coaxing life back into dead circuits. Every repaired panel, every flicker of a revived light, is a small victory against the vast emptiness. But it's not enough. We're survivors, not settlers. Just yesterday, I finally got the main comms panel online. The static hissed, a ghost of a connection, but no matter how I boosted the signal, home wouldn't answer. Astria felt further away than ever. Ethan saw the look on my face. He knew. Pushing the signal harder meant broadcasting our location to anyone listening, a risk we couldn't afford. The memories started flooding back then. The chaos, the attack, his promise to get me home, my duty, my family. They're all waiting on Astria. This outpost was a bandage, but now it feels like a cage. That's when we saw it. A plume of dust on the horizon, growing larger, faster. A rugged rover, scarred and armored, kicking up a storm. Raiders, their leader, brute in a patched leather coat, stepped out with his crew, weapons glinting in the dim light. There was no time to think, only to act. Ethan grabbed his blaster, shouting for me to get to the transport bay. We scrambled, blaster fire echoing through the metal corridors as they swarmed the outpost. It was a desperate, chaotic fight for every inch. We made it to the old freighter just as they breached the bay doors. The ramp slammed shut, cutting off their shouts. I threw myself into the cockpit, hands flying across the console while Ethan held them off. The engines whined, then roared to life. With a gut-wrenching lurch, we lifted off, leaving the outpost and the raiders in a cloud of dust and fury. We're not safe yet, not by a long shot. But we're in the sky again, the stars our guide, and for the first time in a long time, we're heading home. The journey to Astria has just begun. Thanks so much for watching our story unfold. If you enjoyed this adventure, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. See you in the stars. The stars stretched like a river of light as the small ship carried Ethan and Lila through space. For many days they traveled in silence, guided only by the old maps Ethan had stored in the system. The engines hummed softly, and the glow from the control panel lit their faces in the dark cabin. Lila often looked out the window, watching the endless stars, wondering if her mother was looking at the same sky. Ethan checked the ship's systems again and again. He knew the journey was dangerous. The space between the colonies and Astria was filled with raiders, storms, and broken satellites from the wars long ago. Still, he kept the ship steady. He had promised to bring Lila home, and he would not fail. One night, while Lila slept in the small rest chamber, Ethan saw a warning light flash. The fuel level was dropping faster than expected. He frowned and adjusted the controls. A leak in the lower tank had started to drain their supply. Without enough fuel, they would not reach Astria. Return the ship toward a nearby moon that had once been a refueling station. It was abandoned now, but it might still have something useful. When Lila awoke, Ethan told her about the problem. She stayed calm, though worry showed in her eyes. They landed on the moon's surface. The place was quiet and covered in dust. Old buildings stood half buried in sand, their walls cracked from time. Together they stepped out, their boots leaving marks in the soft ground. Ethan carried a scanner, searching for any sign of power left in the ruins. Inside an old storage hall, they found rusted fuel tanks and broken tools. But one tank still had pressure inside. Ethan smiled for the first time in days. He began connecting cables and hoses while Lila held the flashlight. She watched him work, noticing how focused he was, even with dirt and sweat on his face. She felt a strange warmth inside her chest, one she could not explain. When the fuel started to flow into their ship, they both felt relief. But their peace did not last long. From the ridge above, a small group of scavengers spotted them. These men lived by stealing from travelers and selling what they found. Seeing a working ship was a rare prize. They moved quietly down the slope, their weapons ready. Ethan noticed them just in time. He shouted for Lila to get inside the ship. The scavengers opened fire, and the sound echoed through the empty valley. Lila ran, ducking behind the landing gear. Ethan fired back with his old blaster, protecting her as he moved closer to the ramp. The air filled with dust and sparks. One scavenger got too close, and Ethan struck him down. Another bullet hit the ship's wing, leaving a smoking hole. Ethan pushed Lila inside and sealed the door. He ran to the pilot's seat and started the engines. The scavengers tried to block the path, but the engines roared with power. The ship lifted off, throwing sand and debris into the air. Lila held onto the side rail, her heart racing. Ethan's arm was bleeding again, but he did not stop until they were clear of the moon's surface. When the danger was gone, Lila looked at him with tears in her eyes. He tried to smile, but his face showed pain. She took his arm and cleaned the wound with water and a torn cloth. He told her it was nothing, but she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. She whispered that he had saved her again. Ethan said quietly that he would always protect her, not because she was a princess, but because she was someone worth protecting. The rest of the journey was quieter. Lila spent her time learning to control the ship. Ethan taught her how to read the stars and how to fix small systems. She learned quickly and began to understand the work he did. They shared stories, laughter, and sometimes silence that felt like comfort. Though danger still waited ahead, the bond between them grew stronger with every passing day. As the ship neared Astria's border, the stars ahead began to shift. They saw the faint glow of the royal fleet's patrol lines in the distance. It was the first real sign of home. Lila's heart filled with hope, but Ethan's face turned serious. He knew that once they reached Astria, everything would change. She would return to her world, and he would return to being a nameless wanderer. Still, he kept flying. For now, it was enough to see her safe and alive, moving closer to the place where her mother waited, unaware that her daughter was finally coming home. The royal fleet's signal grew stronger as Ethan's small ship moved closer to Astria. Through the window, the lights of massive patrol ships glowed like stars. Lila pressed her hand against the glass, her eyes wide with emotion. After all the danger and fear, her home was finally within reach. Ethan looked at her and smiled faintly, but inside he felt uneasy. He knew the royal guards might not welcome a man like him. They sent a signal to the fleet, giving their ship's code and location. The response came quickly. A patrol ship broke formation and headed toward them. Ethan guided the small ship to the docking bay as instructed. The moment they landed, the sound of metal boots filled the air. Dozens of guards surrounded them, weapons raised. Ethan raised his hands to show he meant no harm. Lila stepped forward, her voice clear and strong, telling them who she was. The guards hesitated, then lowered their weapons in shock. Within minutes, a transport was sent to take Lila and Ethan to the capital. The journey through the clouds felt unreal. Lila could see the towers of Astria shining in the distance, just as she remembered them. She felt tears rise to her eyes, but held them back. Ethan sat beside her, silent, his hands still bruised from the fight on the moon. He looked out the window, unsure what awaited him on the ground. At the palace gates, a crowd had gathered. The news of the princess's return had spread faster than the wind. The gates opened, and the queen stood waiting. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she stepped forward. When Lila stepped out of the transport, the queen's eyes filled with tears. She ran to her daughter, pulling her into her arms. The people cheered, but their voices faded against the sound of the queen's quiet sobs. She had feared this day would never come. Ethan stood a few steps behind, his heart heavy and proud at the same time. The queen noticed him and asked who he was. Before Lila could answer, one of the guards whispered something to the queen. Her expression changed. They said Ethan was a deserter, a man who left the royal fleet years ago. The guards moved toward him, ready to take him away. Lila quickly stepped in front of them, her voice sharp and full of command. She said that Ethan had saved her life, that he had protected her when no one else could. The guards froze, unsure what to do. The queen looked at her daughter, then at the man who stood silently behind her. She asked him why he helped her when he could have walked away. Ethan bowed his head and said he had once failed to protect those under his command. This time he could not turn away. His words were plain but honest. The queen stared at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with both pain and respect. The palace opened its doors that evening for a grand gathering. The people of Astria filled the courtyards, lighting candles in celebration. Lila stood beside her mother on the balcony, looking down at the cheering crowd. But her thoughts stayed with Ethan. He stood below among the guards, watching quietly, still unsure of his place in this new world. Later that night, the queen called for Ethan to meet her in the royal chamber. The great hall was silent, except for the sound of the wind outside. The queen thanked him for bringing her daughter home. She told him that courage like his was rare, and that the kingdom owed him a great debt. Ethan bowed and said that he wanted no reward, only peace. The queen smiled sadly, saying that peace often finds those who least expect it. When Ethan turned to leave, Lila entered the hall. Her eyes were bright, but her voice trembled slightly as she thanked him once more. She told him that she would never forget what he did. He replied that he only kept his promise.
Yeah.
For a moment, neither spoke. The distance between them was filled with unspoken words. Then Ethan bowed and said goodbye, walking away into the shadows of the hall. That night, Lila stood by her balcony, watching the stars. The same stars she once saw from Ethan's ship now shone above her home. Her mother joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. She told her that true strength is not in crowns or power, but in kindness and loyalty. Lila nodded, knowing that her mother's words were true. Far away, somewhere beyond the city lights, Ethan walked through the quiet streets, carrying nothing but memories and the peace of a promise kept. The journey was over, but its meaning would stay with them both forever. The morning after the celebration, the palace was quiet again. The lights that once shone through the night had dimmed, leaving only the golden rays of the sun spilling across the marble floors. Princess Lila woke early and walked through the halls she had not seen in months. Every painting, every scent of the gardens, felt like a memory coming back to life. Yet one thing was missing. Ethan was gone. She went to the guards and asked where he was. One of them told her that he had left before sunrise. He had taken an old travel ship from the royal docks and disappeared beyond the city gates. Lila felt a sharp ache in her heart. She knew he did not belong to the world of crowns and ceremonies, but she had hoped he would stay long enough to say goodbye. Without thinking twice, she rushed to her mother's chamber. Queen Eleanor sat near the window, reading letters from the governors of the outer colonies. She looked up when Lila entered. The queen saw the worry in her daughter's face and asked what troubled her. Lila said that Ethan had left without a word. The queen smiled softly, though her eyes showed sadness. She told her daughter that some people carry pain they do not wish to share. He had done his duty and now wanted to live in peace. Lila nodded, but felt no comfort. Later that day, the queen invited the leaders of Astria to a meeting in the Great Hall. She spoke of her daughter's return and the courage of the man who saved her. She told the story of how Ethan had fought raiders, repaired ships, and risked his life to protect Lila. Her voice trembled when she said that kindness and bravery were greater than any title. The people listened in silence and many wept. When she finished, she announced that Ethan would forever be honored as a guardian of the realm. His name would be carved into the walls of the royal archive for future generations to remember. As the news spread across the kingdom, people lit candles in his honor. Farmers in the countryside, soldiers in the barracks, and merchants in the city markets spoke of the man who had stood alone against danger to save their princess. Songs were written about him, calling him the silent defender. Though Ethan himself never knew, his story began to inspire many who had lost faith and courage. Far from the capital, Ethan traveled through the green plains of Astria. He had no map, only a simple direction. He wanted to see the world again, not as a soldier, but as a man who had learned the value of life. In a small village near the river, he found work repairing machines and helping the locals rebuild their homes. The people there did not know who he was, and he preferred it that way. He lived quietly, watching sunsets and stars, thinking sometimes of the girl he had saved. Back in the palace, Lila often stood by the balcony at night. She looked toward the horizon, wondering where he might be. She missed the hum of his ship, the steady tone of his voice, and the way he always faced danger without fear. Her mother noticed her sadness but said nothing. She understood that some bonds are not bound by time or distance. Weeks later, during a public festival, Lila stepped forward to speak to the people. She told them that her survival was not only her own strength, but also the bravery of another. She spoke of hope, compassion, and the power of unity. Her words touched every heart. The queen watched proudly, knowing her daughter had grown wiser from her journey. That night, when fireworks filled the sky, Lila whispered to herself that she would meet Ethan again one day, even if it took years. In the quiet village, Ethan looked up at the same fireworks from far away. He smiled faintly, as if hearing her words carried by the wind. For him, saving her had already been enough. He had no riches or titles, but he carried peace in his heart. The stars above reminded him of the journey they shared and the promise he made to protect her no matter what. In time, legends would tell of the princess who returned from the dark with the help of a brave man who asked for nothing. And though kingdoms would rise and fall, their story remained as a symbol of faith and courage. It was said that the queen herself often stood on her balcony, tears shining in her eyes, whispering to the stars, "Mother, I'm back." He defended me, though I was weak. Those words became the heart of a tale that lived forever, reminding everyone that true strength is not in power, but in the goodness of the human heart.